go to the US and speak to Tom O'Connor, an award-winning senior foreign policy writer at the magazine Newsweek. Tom, great to see you. If I were to suggest that without Western troops in Afghanistan, it's all over and the Taliban are going to win, whatever win means, what would you say?
Well, I would say, first of all, that the phase that we're seeing right now in the Afghan conflict, certainly a rapid development from the past year. What we're seeing right now is the Taliban consolidating its gains, taking the opportunity, knowing it's going to meet as little resistance as ever, and identifying where it's going to meet that resistance. Now, we haven't seen them move into any cities, provincial capitals, and certainly not Kabul yet. So I think that it's important to remember that this right now is a phase, a military phase, with the potential for a diplomatic phase to come, but not until the Taliban feels it has the leverage that it needs to get there.
Yeah, I mean, okay, if you're talking about the diplomatic phase, there's a statement, and tell me if this is new or not. The Taliban are demanding that Ashraf Ghani, the president of Afghanistan, stand down and that there be some sort of new system in place.
Well, you know, this is the point in the conflict, as I said before, where these maximalist demands are going to come out. I mean, at some point, it could very well mean that the Taliban will not accept Ghani in power. They want a shared government. They feel like they have the leverage to do that. Now, the U.S. won't be the only power in the region. Sad to see Ghani go. But if the alternative is him holding on to a Northern Alliance-style enclave government in Kabul while he's surrounded by the Taliban, it's a severe strain on Afghanistan. So whether or not we'll see a new round of Afghan elections, whether we'll see a shared power system. This is stuff that isn't even really, I don't think, becoming serious, isn't really even seriously talked about at the moment because the Taliban is advancing rapidly. And until that point stops, those talks aren't going to get serious.
How do the diplomatic efforts and the peace process and trying to kickstart it again, how does that fit into the equation that's playing out on the battlefields?
Well, again, I think that with the Taliban taking most of the country at this point, including the borders, the international borders of Afghanistan, which is very important because that plays into not only Afghanistan's domestic situation, but also the regional powers. And I named China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, of course, among them. At this phase in the conflict, I do see that the Taliban has not precluded the idea of eventually getting to a diplomatic solution at sitting down and getting there. Now, as far as the military situation, we have the U.S. promising to provide security assurances. We saw them conduct airstrikes. We've seen over-the-horizon capabilities, as the Pentagon calls it, meaning that they don't have to leverage troops on the ground. But as far as U.S. security on the ground, it's hard to imagine what they could really do there now that they couldn't do for 20 years before.
Tom, who are the main benefactors? Who are the main suppliers of weapons, of finances to the Taliban that they can continue to mount these kinds of assaults after 20 years of foreign troops being there trying to counter this group? Are they selling drugs? Are they selling heroin and hashish, or are they getting money from outside?
Well, Afghanistan certainly is always been a hotbed of opium production, narcotics. It's perhaps the top in the world when it comes to opiates specifically. So certainly there seems to be an element going in that with the economy. It's also a concern for the regional countries that if instability breaks out, that drug trade could cross borders. Obviously, in past decades, we'd seen Pakistan. I guess it goes back to even, if we want to talk about the Mujahideen in the 1980s and 1990s, we've seen Pakistan support, we've seen Saudi support. Now, things have changed over time. The Taliban has managed to become quite a self-sufficient group. That's not to say it doesn't receive any international support, but the fear right now is that any power in the region is suspicious that another rival power will leverage the Taliban against them. So right now we're seeing the Taliban kind of feeling out how it can make these engagements in the region. And it's worked so far because the Taliban has been to Tehran, it's been to Moscow, it's talking to Chinese officials. So the Taliban, I think right now is sort of in some ways, it's sort of a free agent, and a lot of powers around there realize that there's something to be gained by negotiating with a group perhaps in past years they wouldn't before.
Tom, always appreciate it. Thank you so much indeed. Newsweek's Tom O'Connor.